We are counting down 25 things World War II soldiers taught their families before shipping out. Not sentimental goodbyes, but survival lessons. In the final weeks, men sat at kitchen tables and passed on everything they knew: how to run the furnace, stretch a ration book, and stay calm when the telegram came. Some lessons were practical, some were desperate. All were urgent. 16 million Americans served. Almost all left someone behind. Before they went, they taught, showed, and wrote things down. Notes still kept in drawers today. This is what they said. Which lesson mattered most? Let's count down from 25. 25. How to read the ration book. By 1942, every household had colored stamps. Blue stamps were for canned goods. Red stamps were for meat and dairy. Sugar had its own book. Spend it wrong, and you went without. Before leaving, soldiers walked families through the ration book page by page. They pointed out expiration dates, the point system, and which grocer followed the rules and which did not. It was not just about food, it was about planning weeks ahead. Those who learned fed their families for 4 years. Those who did not learned the hard way. 24. How to keep a victory garden alive. By 1943, 20 million victory gardens filled backyards and vacant lots. Planting was easy. Keeping them alive in summer heat was not. Men taught how to read the soil, when to water, how to spot real stress versus midday wilt. They explained companion planting and pest control. Some even drew maps. Families who followed them ate all summer. Others guessed, and some guessed wrong. Number 23. How to prepare a chicken for dinner. In wartime, protein often came from the yard, but someone had to turn a live bird into a meal. This was a hard lesson, but it was necessary. Soldiers taught the quickest, cleanest method for scalding, plucking, and dressing the bird without waste. By the end of the war, women across America had done it countless times and had passed it on. 22. How to save every drop of fat. Used cooking fat became war material. Families were asked to collect it. Soldiers taught exactly how. Strain it, store it, reuse it. Nothing wasted. It could cook meals or be turned in for the war effort. For many, this was old Depression knowledge. For others, it was entirely new. Lesson 21st. How to write letters past censorship. Every letter was read. One wrong detail could be cut. Families learned the rules. No locations, no dates, no signs of fear or weakness. Instead, they used coded language, reading between the lines. Couples built private systems that censors could not catch. Entire conversations were hidden in plain sight. 20. How to run the furnace. In colder states, the furnace meant survival. Men showed how to check levels, bleed radiators, and conserve fuel. In a winter of rationing, mistakes meant freezing. Those who learned stayed warm. Those who didn't suffered. Number 19. How to keep the car running. Rubber was scarce. New tires were nearly impossible to get. Families were taught how to change a tire, check the oil, and maintain the engine. These were simple skills, but they were critical. Months later, on dark roads with no help in sight, those lessons made the difference. Number 18. How to deal with creditors on your own. Depression-era debt was still fresh in 1941. Many families carried mortgages, installment payments on furniture or appliances, and small loans from local banks or relatives. When a man deployed, his monthly military pay allotment replaced his wage, and it was almost always less. Creditors had to be managed. Men explained the allotment system before they left. They told their wives which bills took priority in which order. Mortgage first, always. Utilities second. Everything else negotiable. They explained how to call a creditor and ask for a deferment, using language that was respectful but firm, because there were laws protecting military families, and not every creditor volunteered that information. They also warned against pride. Some wives would have gone without groceries before calling a creditor to renegotiate. Some husbands sat them down and said plainly that these people will wait. Your children cannot. That conversation changed how some families survived the next 4 years. Number 17. How to preserve food by water bath canning. The ball jar was as essential to the wartime kitchen as the ration book. Canning garden produce in summer meant eating in February. men who had grown up watching their mothers do. It taught the technique to wives who had grown up in cities where food came from a store. The lesson was exacting because the stakes were real, the wrong temperature, and the seal would fail. A failed seal in the jar would go bad without looking bad. Eating it anyway could kill a child. Fathers sat at kitchen tables and explained the difference between high-acid foods, tomatoes, pickles, fruit, which were safe to process in a boiling water bath, and low-acid foods, green beans, corn, meat, which required a pressure canner to reach the temperature that killed botulism. Women who learned this well put up hundreds of jars a season. Their root cellars glowed with rows of tomatoes, peaches, green beans, and pickled beets that carried families through the scarce months. Women who did not learn this taught themselves from library books and neighbors and made mistakes that were mostly small and occasionally serious. Number 16, how to sew and patch and make clothing last. New clothing was not rationed in the United States the way it was in Britain, but it was expensive. Fabric was diverted to uniforms and parachute silk, and a family on a reduced military allotment could not buy a new pair of children's trousers every season. Clothing had to last. Men who had grown up watching their mothers sew passed on what they knew: how to darn a sock over a wooden darning egg so the mend held, how to cut a worn shirt down to fit a younger child, how to let out a hem without leaving a visible line, how to patch the knees of work pants with pieces cut from the worn-out back pockets of a pair already beyond saving. Sewing and mending kept garments serviceable for longer. Some of these lessons surprised the men giving them. They had not thought of themselves as people who knew how to sew. But the Depression had made practical people out of everyone, and what they knew they gave, sometimes clumsily, sometimes in handwritten notes on index cards that their wives kept in sewing baskets until they yellowed and crumbled. Practical knowledge often outlived the paper it was written on. Pattern break. Here is what nobody talks about. The Army and Navy published official pamphlets for families left behind. They covered rationing and victory gardens and morale. What they did not cover was the specific private knowledge that lived in individual households and had never been written down anywhere. The knowledge of a particular furnace, a particular neighbor to call in a particular emergency, a particular way to talk to a particular landlord. That knowledge lived only in the man who was leaving. The lesson of number 15 on this list was given in almost every household, and it was never in any pamphlet. Number 15, how to handle the Western Union telegram. Every family knew what a Western Union telegram meant during the war. The boy on the bicycle, the yellow envelope, the message that began so often, "The Secretary of War desires me to express his deep regret." Before they shipped out, men told their families what to do if that telegram came. Not in those words. No one said directly that here is what to do when I am dead. Instead, they said simple instructions. If something happens, call your mother first. The insurance policy is in the top left drawer of the desk. You do not have to open it alone. Ask the neighbor to be there. Some men wrote letters to be opened only if they did not come home. They gave those letters to wives, to mothers, to the oldest children, and said where they were and told them not to open the letters early. Most of those letters began the same way. If you are reading this, there are things I need you to know. Historians have found thousands of those letters in attic boxes. Almost none of them talked about the war. Almost all of them talked about love, and about what the person left behind was capable of, and about the specific ways in which the writer was proud of them. Number 14, how to keep children calm when you are not calm yourself. This was the lesson no one asked for. Men observed that children watched their mothers, the way animals watch the weather. A mother who was frightened produced frightened children. A mother who moved through fear with her face controlled and her voice steady gave her children something to hold on to. The advice was practical to the point of being uncomfortable. Do not let them see you read the newspaper. Make the dinner routine the same every night. Let them have one worry question a day and answer it honestly, and then close the subject. If you are going to cry, cry after they are asleep. This was not cruelty. It was the knowledge of men who had grown up in the Depression, who remembered what it felt like to be 6 years old and watch a parent's face go blank with fear, and who did not want their children to carry that. The women who followed this advice often said later that they did not know how they had managed. They had managed in part because they had been told how. Number 13. How to identify a gas leak, a faulty wire, and a failing water heater. These were the emergencies that happened without warning and without a man in the house to handle them. Before leaving, soldiers walked through their homes, pointed at every system that could go wrong, and described what it would look or smell like when it did. Gas smells like rotten eggs. If you smell it, do not turn on or off any light switch. Open windows. Get the children out first. Call the gas company from the neighbor's telephone. The lesson was repeated twice. An electrical fire often starts behind the wall and smells like burning insulation before it smells like anything else. If an outlet is warm to the touch, do not use it. A water heater that is knocking or leaking from the pressure valve is not fine. These are the things that kill people quietly, and they kill people more often when there is no one at home who knows what they are. Women who received this lesson became the women their neighbors called in an emergency. They became the ones who knew what to do and did it. Number 12. How to ask for help without apologizing for needing it. This was the lesson given by men who had watched their own mothers suffer through pride and who had grown up in households where asking for help meant admitting failure, where a closed front door meant a closed family, and where whatever was happening inside stayed inside. They told their wives and mothers directly, if something breaks, ask the neighbor. If the money runs short, ask the church. If you are sick and the children need watching, call my sister, and mean it when you call her. There is no honor in struggling alone when there are people around you who want to help and have been waiting to be asked. The war has changed what it means to need help. Everyone needs help now. Ask for it. Some men who gave this lesson had never asked for help themselves. They gave the advice knowing they could not follow it. They gave it anyway because the person they were leaving had less experience with hardship, and they wanted that person to survive. Number 11. How to read a military pay allotment and fight a bureaucratic error. The government allotment system was not simple. A soldier designated a portion of his pay to be sent home directly, and the remaining pay went to him. The allotment amounts changed based on rank, time in service, and dependency status. Errors happened constantly, and fixing them required patience, documentation, and a willingness to write letters to offices in Washington that could take weeks to respond. Men explained the system and left copies of their service number, rank, and allotment designation with their families. They told wives what the correct amount should be, and they said, if it is wrong for 2 months in a row, write a letter. Here is the address. Here is what to say in the letter. Keep a copy of every letter you send. Keep a copy of every letter you receive. Women who followed this advice caught errors and recovered money that families desperately needed. Women who assumed the government had it right sometimes went months short before anyone noticed. The lesson was not about distrust. It was about verification, because systems made by humans in wartime made human mistakes. Pattern break. The Army did something remarkable in 1943. It surveyed returning veterans about what they missed most. The answers that came back were not what the survey designers expected. Most men did not say steak or a comfortable bed. They said ordinary things, the sound of a specific person's voice, A particular meal made a particular way. The smell of a house they had been responsible for. What the men who gave these lessons were giving was a version of that ordinary life kept intact. They were trying to ensure that what they came home to would still be there to come home to. Number 10. How to make a meal from almost nothing. Depression cooking lived in the memory of every American who had been an adult in the 1930s. Soldiers who had watched their mothers stretch $1 across a whole week passed the knowledge on before they left because military allotments were thin and grocery prices were rising. The specific lessons varied by region and family. In the South, how to make a pot of beans fill 6 people with cornbread made from scratch. In the Midwest, how to turn a soup bone into 3 days of meals. In cities, how to make fried rice from yesterday's plain rice, 1 egg, and whatever green was in the icebox. The common thread was fat and salt. Fat made plain food satisfying. Salt made simple food taste like more than it was. Men who knew their way around a Depression kitchen gave precise recipes from memory, standing at the stove and cooking them once so the person watching would feel the texture in their hands and not just hear the words. Some of those recipes were never written down anywhere else. They exist only in the memories of the children who ate them during the war and have since taught them to their own children, a form of knowledge that passed through hunger and survived. A leaking faucet, a stuck window sash, a toilet that ran, a gate hinge pulling loose from the post. These were the repairs that cost money to have done and cost nothing but time to do yourself if you knew how. Men bought small collections of basic tools before they left and wrote instructions for using them. A washer inside a faucet, a coat of paint on a swollen window sash edge, the specific valve inside a toilet tank that controlled the float. They showed the steps once, then asked the person watching to do it themselves while they stood there, so the knowledge would live in the hands and not just the ears. Hardware stores across America in 1942 and 1943 reported a notable increase in purchases of basic plumbing and carpentry supplies by women. The men had done their work. The women who came in with handwritten lists of exactly what they needed had been taught exactly what to ask for. Number 8. How to make Lee soap from wood ash and rendered fat. This was older knowledge, Depression knowledge, farm knowledge, the kind of knowledge that had skipped a generation in prosperous households and was now being hurriedly passed back. Commercial soap was not rationed exactly, but fats were collected for the war effort, and soap supplies ran short in some regions. The lesson required 2 things most wartime households had in abundance: wood ash from the fireplace or stove, and the rendered fat that was being saved anyway for the grease collection drive. The ash provided lye through leaching. The lye combined with fat at the right ratio to saponify, to turn into soap. Men who knew this had learned it from grandmothers or from the Depression, and they gave the lesson with the specific gravity of something being rescued from near disappearance. Women who received it felt the same way. There are accounts from the 1940s of women writing to their deployed husbands to say they had made the soap and it had worked, and they had given bars to their neighbors who did not know how. A small triumph in an ordinary week, remembered 50 years later. Number 7. How to use a firearm safely and when to use it. Not every soldier gave this lesson. Many did. A woman alone with children in a house, especially in rural areas, was being asked to manage a real safety concern, and some husbands believed she should be able to do more than call the sheriff who was 40 minutes away. The lesson was careful and specific. How to load it, how to check whether it was loaded, where to store it so it could be reached quickly by an adult and could not be reached at all by a child, under what circumstances it was appropriate to present it, how to stand, how to aim, how to breathe. More than the mechanics, men emphasized judgment. The lesson was not how to shoot someone. The lesson was how to be a person who had the capability and understood the gravity of that capability, and would use it calmly if she had to, and would never use it if she did not. Women who received this lesson in good faith, with a partner who trusted their judgment, carried a kind of dignity in their hands for the rest of their lives. Number 6. How to negotiate with a landlord. Rental housing was tight near war production centers. Landlords knew it. Rent gouging was common enough that the government eventually imposed rent controls in defense areas, but enforcement was uneven, and the controls did not reach everywhere. Men who rented told their wives exactly what the lease said, where the lease was kept, and what their rights were under it. They told them what a landlord could legally require and what a landlord could not legally do. They said, "You do not need me here to read a contract. You do not need to smile or apologize or agree to something wrong, because it feels rude to push back." This lesson was inseparable from a larger one about authority. Wartime America was full of people in positions of authority: landlords, creditors, bureaucrats, men at government offices who assumed that a woman alone would not know her rights and would not insist on them. The soldiers who prepared their families gave the opposite message. You know what is right, say so clearly. If they do not hear you, say it again. Number 5, how to keep a household account and know where every dollar went. Military households during the war ran on fixed allotments that did not flex. There was no second income to draw on, no overtime to make up a shortfall, no credit card. Money had to be tracked with precision. Men who had been the ones to handle money sat down with their wives at the kitchen table and built a system together, sometimes for the first time. Income on one side, fixed expenses on the other, a column for variables like groceries, shoes, and repairs. A separate tin or envelope for each category, labeled in pen, was kept in a kitchen drawer. The method that later generations would call the envelope system was the Depression method, the wartime method, and the only method that worked when every dollar was already spoken for. Women who learned this and used it managed their households without debt through the war years. Some of them said it was the first time they had understood where money went, and that understanding made them feel less afraid, not more, because at least it was knowable. At least it had a name. Number 4, how to be a person your children could model themselves on. This was not said out loud in most households. It was given in the form of smaller lessons. Be fair, be honest with the children when honesty is safe, and be protective when it is not. Do not make promises you cannot keep. When you are wrong, say so. When you are frightened, say, "I am handling it." Some men wrote it out in letters meant to be opened only if they did not return. They wrote about what they hoped their children would become and listed the qualities they valued: courage, honesty, patience, a sense of humor in hard times, the willingness to work without certainty of reward. These letters were written by men in their 20s and 30s in a hurry, often at night, with less education than their children would later have, in language that was plain and unpolished. They are among the most important documents of the 20th century, not because of what they describe about the war, but because of what they describe about what a person owes to the people who come after them. Number 3, how to grieve and keep moving. This was the hardest lesson, and most men could not give it directly. They gave it sideways, in small things. They said, "Your mother knows how to get through loss." They said, "Go to church, even if you stop believing." They said, "The children will take their cue from you." Some gave it in the language of their own previous losses. "My father died when I was 12, and your mother kept us together. She did not pretend it was fine. She said it was hard, and she said we were going to make it anyway. That is all you have to do. Say it is hard. Say we are going to make it anyway." Mean the second part. No one could prepare a family for the worst outcome, but men who had thought carefully about what they were leaving for tried to give something that would hold up under weight. They gave it in the last days before departure, in small moments, when the children were asleep and the house was quiet, and the duffel was already packed, and there was nothing left to do but say the true thing clearly. Number 2, where everything important was kept: the insurance policy, the deed to the house or the rental agreement, the birth certificates, the bank book, the name and telephone number of the lawyer who had drawn up the will itself. Men who had never organized their papers organized them the week before shipping out. They sat at desks and kitchen tables and gathered everything into one place, put it in a fireproof box, or a heavy envelope, or a specific drawer that they described and pointed to. They told their wives or mothers where it was, and what each document was, and what to do with each one in the event it was needed. This sounds small. It was not small. Women who knew where the documents were, who had been shown and told, and who had the lawyer's name on a piece of paper in a drawer they could put their hand on in the dark, moved through the worst possible news with something to hold, a set of instructions, a next step. Grief is more survivable when it is not accompanied by complete disorientation, and the men who understood this gave their families the gift of a map when the territory became unrecognizable. Number 1, how to believe they were coming back. The final lesson was not practical. It was an act of will, and the men who gave it knew it was an act of will, and they gave it anyway because the alternative was to leave their families in anticipation of loss. And some of them had decided that this was not a thing they would do. They said, "I am coming back," not as a promise they could keep because they could not promise it, but as the posture they chose and the posture they asked for. They made plans that extended past the war. In March of 1944, a soldier stationed in England wrote to his wife in Ohio to remind her not to plant the apple tree yet, because he wanted to plant it when he came home, and he wanted to plant it in the right spot. And he had been thinking about where the right spot was. He had been thinking about it for 6 months. He came home in September 1945, and they planted it that fall. The lesson was this: maintain the future. Keep making plans that require his presence. Do not pack away his things. Do not settle into his absence as though it is permanent. Keep a place at the table, literally or not, that says this is temporary. He is in transit. He is coming back. Millions of families held that posture for years. Most of the time they were right. When they were not, the posture itself had given them something to live inside, a version of normal that kept them functional, that kept the children fed and the garden growing and the furnace running and the accounts balanced, and that turned out to be exactly the preparation required for whatever came next. These 25 lessons were not taught in any school and printed in no manual. They passed from one person to another at kitchen tables, in basements, in backyard gardens, in the 5 minutes before a bus arrived at a departure depot. They were given by men in their 20s who had never thought of themselves as having anything to teach, to women and children who had never thought of themselves as people who would need to know these things. The country those families built when the men came home was built on both, on what the soldiers brought back with them and on what they had left behind. Share in the comments which lesson you think mattered most. And if your family has a story, a kitchen table lesson that got passed down, leave it below, because this history lives in the details, and the details are running out of people to remember them.